There's something about libs which makes them believe that we've arrived at some sort of invincible stability, that things will always be more or less like they are now. We can't even imagine a future that deviates.
Which is wild because, like, the truth is the Wachowski sisters were the ones that figured out that exact point. It was 1999. They said it very clearly in The Matrix, right? This was the height of your civilization. And now, looking back on it, maybe they were right.
Coming at you with a timely video. By now you're probably sick of hearing about Charles Entertainment Kirk. I know I am. I was sick of hearing about him years ago, but I'm way sicker of it now that he's been murdered. I don't want to talk about this. Everybody's already talked about it, and we're all sick of debating whether we need to be civil about him, sick of the apologetics done to present him as a harmless advocate of free speech and open debate, as though the contents of his speech and what he debated in service of are irrelevant. I don't want to participate in a tiresome, feckless debate about whether one must be civil in the face of a personal tragedy befalling an evil dipshit. From my tone, you can probably determine my position on that. Nor do I want to spend this time dancing on his grave, because as much as I disliked the man, on balance, I do tend to dislike targeted political assassination less. But beyond that, his death creates a lot of problems for everyone else that we are clearly not prepared to handle. More on that later. Not that I really need to explain what I mean by that anyway, because you're a person on the planet. You've read a news headline in the last 2 weeks. You know what I'm talking about. No, I have a much simpler purview for this video. To ask, why do libs feel the need to defend Charlie Kirk and those like him? Now, I get why right-wingers do. I understand what they get out of it. He's their guy, after all. They want to sanitize his image and do this whole myth-making process to have a martyr they can use to justify all of the horrible shit they clearly wanted to do. And
is this real, or is this, like, I just mean is the poster of the AI art? Because I know this is AI art, but did they make a poster of AI art? Like, why not just make an actual, use a picture of him?
Anyway, makes perfect sense. No questions there. But libs? Libs are supposed to dislike this kind of stuff. Why are they participating in this process? Why are they so reverent? I get why they're, like, condemning Charlie's murder. That makes sense. Like, I get why they'd be quick to say, hey, yo, we don't want to see people get killed, even people we don't like. No notes. I don't have a problem with that. In abstract, I agree with it, actually. And so, like, let me be careful in how I phrase this. On account of YouTube's terms of service, because like it's really easy to be snide and callous, as I will prove throughout this video when I am snide and callous. But and I might not personally have cause to grieve the death of this evil shithead. I don't want to be perceived, however, as celebrating his murder. It's sad when people are murdered. Like, my heart goes out to his family and kids and all that, and nobody deserves to lose a loved one. Assassination is a bad thing. We don't like it, do we, folks? But all of that having been said, let us not mince words. Each day, Charlie Kirk rolled out of bed and worked tirelessly to make the world less safe, to raise the temperature, to make political violence more commonplace, acceptable, and lauded. He expressly did not give a shit about the victims of gun violence. He encouraged others not to give a shit about them either. He quite explicitly said that he felt that gun deaths were an acceptable sacrifice in the name of protecting the Second Amendment.
I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights.
He said that feeling empathy for mass shooting victims allowed them to, quote, hijack the narrative. Hijack it from whom? Who else would this narrative belong to? In fact, he believed people shouldn't really care about others at all, just like in general.
Empathy and sympathy. I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that it does a lot of damage, but it is very effective when it comes to politics. Sympathy I prefer more than empathy. That's a separate topic for a different time.
So, the man we are meant to be having empathy for, to respect the beliefs of, literally believed empathy was damaging nonsense. It's actually an insult to his memory to have empathy for him, which is one of the reasons why I try to do it. There has seldom existed such a high-profile and explicit advocate of arbitrary political violence. Kirk celebrated political violence done to his enemies. When Paul Pelosi was attacked in his home by a hammer-wielding intruder, Charlie Kirk called for a, quote, patriot to bail out the attacker. He celebrated Trump's occupation of D.C., calling for shock and awe, force, and referred to the people being targeted as cockroaches, Very specific language that may not have been a deliberate invocation of Nazi rhetoric, but very much accords with it. And he was, of course, an explicit Zionist and defended the genocide in Gaza, where hundreds of thousands of people have been murdered so far.
You know, it's funny, I used to say that, hey, if you as a gay person would go to Gaza, they'd throw you off of tall buildings, right? Now they don't have any tall buildings left, so I don't... Is that too soon? I'm sorry. Maybe you shouldn't kill Jews, stupid Muslims.
So much so, in fact, that Israeli Prime Minister and international war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu tweeted his grief over...
That's also one of the reasons why, as much as it is interesting to watch Candace Owens do everything in her power to try and spread a conspiracy theory that he was assassinated in part, potentially, allegedly, by Israel, I just don't think it holds up to much scrutiny, considering what a avowed and proud Zionist he was, at least front-facingly. If he was privately someone who also was very racist towards Jewish people, I think that just goes further to demonstrate how there should be a separation between people who criticize the actions of the state of Israel and people who are anti-Semitic, you know, because there are a lot of people who are anti-Semitic who are also against the nation state of Israel. That people can be both things, people can be neither, people can be one and then not the other. Just the constant conflation of the two is a very dangerous thing indeed, and anti-Semitic.
Charlie Kirk's death, referring to Kirk as a lion-hearted friend of Israel. He routinely targeted vulnerable people, and I'm not talking about like populations of people here, though obviously he did that as well. I'm talking about specific individuals. He weaponized his platform of millions to direct bigoted harassment towards lists of educators, supposedly brainwashing the nation's youth, stirring up hate and making the listed people the targets of harassment and potential violence. His political project, his goals and aspirations were uniformly violent, uniformly barbaric. He believed in state-sponsored murder for LGBTQ plus people.
Is in Leviticus 18, is that thou shalt lay with another man shall be stoned to death. Miss Rachel, you quote Leviticus 19, love your neighbor as yourself. The chapter before affirms God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matter. Lay with another man shall be stoned to death. God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matter.
He believed in forcing children who've been the victims of rape to be made to give birth to their rapist's baby.
So if you had a daughter and she was 10 and she got raped, would you want her to go through that and carry her rapist baby?
That's awfully graphic.
But it's a real life scenario that happens to many people.
The answer is yes, the baby would be delivered.
He believed in repealing the Civil Rights Act because he viewed people of color as innately inferior.
I'm sorry, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. I want to be as blunt as possible because now I'm connecting two dots. Wait a second, the CEO just said that he's forcing that a white qualified guy is not going to get the job. So I see this guy, he might be a nice person. I say, boy, I hope he's not a Harvard-style affirmative action student that has points for, and he landed half of his flight simulator trials.
To put it bluntly, Charlie Kirk spent his short life in service of specifically creating the aggressive and violent conditions which went on to kill him. To wit, almost all domestic terrorism in the United States is committed by white supremacists and other far-right extremists, almost all of whom would share 99% of their political DNA with Charlie Kirk. And that isn't speculation, by the way. According to a paper from the Department of Justice, since 1990, far-right extremists have committed far more ideologically motivated homicides than far-left or radical Islamist terrorists, including 220...
I wish it was a supercut with the things that Charlie said on YouTube. There's a lot of them. And again, it's one of those things where I saw a lot of people who had never heard of this guy because, again, it's one of those things where, most people aren't completely aware of the lives of pretty hardcore far-right political pundits unless they are very tapped into online politics or otherwise. And then all of a sudden, because there was this global movement by a lot of people, mostly right-wingers, but also some just really ridiculous liberals, like in Canada, giving him a standing ovation in Parliament, for example, a lot of people had to learn who he was. And then I saw a lot of other people suddenly being like, within the past week, I've been told to try and treat this person I'd never heard of as a saint. And the more I watched clips of him and the more I read the things that he wrote, I realized that he was a white supremacist. And what the fuck are we doing here? And it's like, well, yeah, that's pretty much what MAGA is doing, is they're trying to deify a white supremacist, and in so doing, they're also Streisand affecting a lot of the horrifying things that he actually put out there into the world. And they've also created the situation where you can't say anything bad about him. Like, you can't even, in some cases, say the things that he said. That's enough for some people to get fired. You got fired from your job for... I just posted a quote. I posted a quote that he said. Yeah, but you were saying that what he said was bad. Well, yeah, because it is. It's a very racist quote. Right. So that's the problem. You shouldn't have said that. I mean, the guy was just murdered in cold blood. I mean, his children, they don't have a father. His wife is widowed. How dare you? And it's like, but I wasn't saying that was a good thing. I wasn't celebrating that. I was saying, why would we lie about who he was? That's very strange and weird and dystopian and frightening. Like, you aren't even allowed to say that he was divisive. This should not be normalized. This is the scariest thing that all the right have been trying to do, because obviously part of this project is over and over again trying to normalize more extreme rhetoric. When you have the reality that just got leaked, that, you know, thousands and thousands of private messages between young Republicans, people in positions of power, by the way, in different organizations, are just basically talking to each other like Hitler Youth. They're just straight up saying that they want to gas Jews. They are calling black people every racial slur they can come up with. They are celebrating rape, saying that it's based and epic and stuff like that. All of this is coming out and coming to light, instead of the Republicans and the right universally, by the way, stating that what they said is just categorically disgusting, reprehensible, not things we ever want to associate themselves with. A lot of pundits are focusing way more on who the fuck leaked this shit, and that we shouldn't be giving in to this whole cancel culture mob shit and like, oh, what, I'm going to condemn all these. Yes, you should. You absolutely should. In the same way it's expected of anybody who's a decent human being, when you find out that someone you may have liked, or someone who may have been your hero even, or someone who you may have really enjoyed the work of, it turns out that they are someone who commits sexual assault, you should at that point suddenly recognize, holy shit, that person was a monster. And you can do the whole, I want to separate art from the artist and stuff. We could have that, the entirely different discussion. But in no way should you suddenly just sit back and be like, you know what, maybe at this point, it's maybe I have to start thinking about whether or not I consider that to be a bad thing. That's dangerous. That's fucked up. You should universally be condemning a lot of this extreme Nazi shit. It doesn't matter who's saying it. But now the right have moved past that, because again, a lot of them are trying actively to normalize this.
27 events that took more than 520 lives. In the same period, far-left extremists committed 42 ideologically motivated attacks that took 78 lives. That paper, by the way, has been removed from the Department of Justice's website in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death and the subsequent crackdown on far-left violence that most likely had nothing to do with it. His death should serve as the strongest possible repudiation of his life's work and beliefs, a demonstration that the wages of hate are violence and death. He quite literally died under a banner which read, "Prove me wrong." How explicit does the universe need to be with its symbolism? It's critical that we make that clear, because good God, have Charlie's bedfellows exploited his death to advance that hateful, violent project. The myth of Charlie Kirk is this peaceful champion of the free expression of ideas, which is being actively written right now, is being used to stomp down on dissent, violate people's rights, and escalate tensions. More Charlie Kirks, and more thought slimes for that matter, will die as a direct result of this. Okay, so with that preamble out of the way, I can move on to the question I wanted to ask in this video. Why are libs like this? You know, how come? Why are they tripping over their own dicks, not to simply condemn Kirk's assassination, but to proactively contribute to his post-mortem sanitization? Why are they so ready, nay, eager to comply with this narrative? What are they getting out of it? How come libs? How come you're like this, libs? Like, why are you so servile, so willing to do whatever your enemies want you to do every single time? Like, why is it so easy to get them all to stand in single file and step up to the podium and say, Charlie Kirk was cool and good and my best friend and I wanted to suck his dick and I don't think he ever believed anything bad ever? Like, why are you so fucking useless all of the time, always? Now, please understand that when I say libs, I don't necessarily mean like liberals, not exclusively. Anyway, I mean it in the sense that like all hyper online leftists like me use it, which is that like it's anyone who's being annoying. No, not really. But like, look, I could be more specific than that, but I think you kind of get it, right? Like liberalism is a specific ideological position with specific characteristics, but I'm not really talking about that. I'm not talking about like Hobbes and Keynes and shit. I'm not talking about liberals necessarily. Though, you know, I am predominantly talking about liberals, of course. When I refer to libs, I'm talking about something broader than that, something a bit more difficult to define. We're talking about people who take for granted that the liberal democratic status quo is the natural order to which we will always inevitably return, and whose political imaginations are limited to, more or less, what exists right now with maybe some small changes here and there. Usually highly educated, otherwise intelligent people who have somehow completely lost touch with the modern political landscape and the threats which face them. I have described this phenomenon in the past as the liberal mind prison, how liberalism itself functions not just as a set of beliefs, but also as the boundaries of what beliefs a mind is allowed to hold. But this logic isn't limited to just ideological liberals, not really. You see this everywhere once you start looking for it, from what Mark Fisher called capitalist realism to Francis Fukuyama declaring the end of history. There's something about libs which makes them believe that we've arrived at some sort of invincible stability, that things will always be more or less like they are now. We can't even imagine a future that deviates to.
Which is wild because, like, the truth is the Wachowski sisters were the ones that figured out that exact point. It was 1999. They said it very clearly in The Matrix, right? This was the height of your civilization. And now, looking back on it, maybe they were right. Because, like, you know, when smartphones came out and all these neat things, I was like, I love technology so much. This is so phenomenal and amazing that we have the sum total of human knowledge in our hands. And this is only going to get better. And they're using all of this publicly funded technology, you know, like GPS systems and stuff like that to get us finding things faster. And they're just really neat, these smartphones. And social media is kind of cool too. We can be interconnected with humanity. We can share stories with one another. It might even have revolutionary potential to organize different demonstrations and stuff like that. It's just wonderful, these things that we have. I'm very happy with this. And then as things went on and the enshittification process began, and then the complete consolidation and monopolization of, again, tech and all of our conversations, just the human interactions in general, which is just a wild and baffling thing to think that there's only about 5 companies that control everything that we do, and we talk to each other. And they also can stop us from talking to each other if they want to. Well, now I'm kind of like, where are we going with all this? You know, it just feels a lot like humanity is failing. Like, it's like, hey, are we going to be working on developing new interesting technologies? No, we just want basically slop. Slop is the future. We want to be able to steal the sum total of human creation and then just regurgitate it back to you and not have to pay people who want to make new things. So if you want to make new things, you're fucked because there's really no financial ability for you to make a living in life. And for everyone else, you're just going to get regurgitation. Slop. Yep. And if you don't like it, you will eventually, because we'll just keep feeding you slop until the point where you just know no difference between slop and the other stuff. We'll just be like, I'm kind of used to the slop now, so I'm fine with that. What's this? Netflix? No more original series? Now it's just Netflix the Sora edition, where I can just basically get endless and regurgitated slop shows that aren't ever as good as their originals and sometimes don't make sense. And occasionally you will see fingers do some weird things like that, but it doesn't matter because it's just endless. It's endless and it's burning the planet at an accelerated rate. So thanks, technology. The end will never come.
Too much from the structure of our current lives. I say we because I think libism, a term which is distinct from liberalism because I made it up and I therefore get to say what it means, is not so much a political ideology as a bad habit that anyone, myself included of course, can fall into. A lib isn't a thing that you are, it's a thing that you're being sometimes. Sometimes leftists are being libs. Sometimes fascists are being libs. Sometimes your dad is a lib. Sometimes Spider-Man is a lib. Everyone is libs once in a while. Let's all work on not being libs all the time. A lib believes that politics doesn't really change all that much. Any belief system which strays too far from the status quo reads to them as purely hypothetical and abstract. It's why they dismiss leftists and leftist propositions out of pocket for not being serious, because any systemic change on its face is unserious. You can't make big changes. We've arrived at the final form of government, and all that's left is to make some minor patches along the way. We maintain the current order.
Reform.
We don't seek to create a new order, because that simply can't be done. Nothing can defeat the current order, and anything which does will inevitably collapse and return to the current order very shortly. This makes libs extremely, frustratingly unable to confront extremism of any kind. If you take it for granted that big changes are just flat out impossible, then any argument about big changes is just a matter of opinion and won't have an effect on the world one way or another. It's a hypothetical, a discussion to be had in the abstract that will have no effect on the real world. Nobody can be hurt by that except like their feelings, I guess. So as long as everyone's being polite, as long as we're all being nice and not emotionally provocative, what does it matter if we just have a difference of opinion, no matter what that opinion might be? I mean, come on, it's not like they can do anything about it, you know? It's all simply a discussion, an exchange of ideas. Charlie Kirk, like most right-wing media figures, was really good at manipulating this weakness. Not because he was like slick or particularly compelling, because it's just really really easy to exploit. He would frame his arguments carefully to make his provocations to violence clear enough to his audience, but always to maintain plausible deniability, to limit himself to the abstract, distant proposals, things that he knew liberals would disagree with, but dismiss as impossible. Now make note, of course, he's hardly alone in this. We do this on the left all the time. We know that when we call to end capitalism on a platform owned by a multi-trillion-dollar corporation, they let us get away with it because on some level, they don't really take it seriously. It does not read to them as a genuine threat because they don't really believe it's possible. But if I were to say, we should kill Dr. Steve YouTube, the chief engagement officer of YouTube, I would go to jail for that. Rightfully so, right? Because I tried to murder a guy. For the record, Dr. Steve YouTube is a fine man, a brave man. And just because almost every single choice made by the leadership of this website is terrible, doesn't mean that I cannot be friends with Dr. Steve YouTube MD. Kirk understood he couldn't call for violence directly. That would break the rules. That would be a clear violation. That's immediate. And even libs know things like that are real threats. He'd just smile and calmly lay out the moral justification for violence to be done, granting his audience moral permission to engage in violence without ever being on the hook for it himself. He wouldn't say something as crass as, go stone gay people, everybody. That would be incitement. No, he'd simply say that we should live in accordance with the teachings of the Bible. And the Bible says we should do that if you consciously ignore the much more numerous and direct parts of the Bible which say explicitly not to do that. He'd leave his audience to connect the dots, but was savvy enough never to connect them himself, making all of his violent rhetoric implication and subtext. And to libs, again, not liberals necessarily, but libs, there's a big, important distinction between saying we should stone gay people, bad, violent, dangerous, and it's my personal religious conviction that we should amend the law to make the punishment for being gay a stoning. Merely insulting, suggestive, buffoonish. Now sure, they wouldn't like that he said the latter. They might find it disgusting, but it's not dangerous. It could become dangerous if a critical mass of people came to believe it, but that's too big a change to expect to happen anytime soon. It's outside the scope of what they imagine is possible, so why worry about it? In their minds, the damage done by this kind of rhetoric is exclusively emotional. It's hurtful, it's dehumanizing, it makes people feel bad. And so they condemn it with the strongest possible wag of the finger, but it's not in and of itself like violent, right? Any violence being discussed here is just hypothetical. We don't need to concern ourselves with it as anything other than a thought experiment. It's not a threat in the real world, it's just a bad take. We can discuss this rationally because as long as it all stays within the realm of opinion, nobody gets hurt. To them, being confrontational to such an idea is just as bad as holding that idea. Because remember, the only thing they really see wrong with it is that it might hurt people's feelings. So if you hurt Charlie's feelings by telling him he's a piece of shit with bad ideas, you've done the exact same thing to him that he's doing to queer people. The only way to defeat him and the things he stands for.
It's like Michael Knowles eradicate trans ideology. Absolutely. That's such a great example of it. He's not the only one who would promote that, right? But that line just kept being used over and over, including by people like Matt Walsh, where it's just like, they're not calling for the complete eradication or the complete extermination of all trans people. They're trying to get rid of the radical ideology that has fooled them into believing there's something that they are not. And in doing that, I'm actually trying to help them, you see? And that way it gives Michael Knowles actually the ability to be even extra condescending, because he can act like, you know, he's some kind of paternal figure who's like, I'm just trying to help you figure out and get rid of all of this brainwashing that's happened to you online through whatever brought you down this dark path. I don't know if it was sissy hypnotic porn. That's what he's obsessed with. I don't know if it was you watching too much sissy hypnotic porn, or perhaps you had simply watched some TV show that featured a trans character or something of that nature. But whatever brought you to the pathway that you are at, I'm here to help you by de-radicalizing you away from this radical ideology. That's what I'm saying when I say I want to eradicate transgenderism from society. And obviously, anyone who's trans can tell you that is not something that is simply a separational part of their existence. It's kind of like, would you remove someone's ability to be a homosexual? Can you just stop being a homosexual? Could you say, I want to eradicate homosexuality from society? And then someone would be like, wait, you want to kill all the gays? No, I wasn't saying that. I was saying I want to get rid of the extremist ideology that you've fallen into into, probably through, again, sissy hypnotic porn that has made you into liking dudes. And if I can just get rid of that, you'll return to being straight, which is why we have things like conversion therapy to be able to torture you into being straight, because obviously you want to be straight so badly that you need to be electrocuted in order to be it. And then if you heard it like that, you might be like, well, it really sounds like you want to kill all the gays, though. Yeah, you know, would you say you want to eradicate Jewishness from society? The idea of being black, like that kind of stuff, would you say that? Because as soon as you say that, people might be like, holy shit, you're a Nazi. But you can get away with saying it towards trans people because you just call it transgenderism. That's what you're trying to do.
Therefore, is by being welcoming and accepting, even when you know he's going to use that acceptance to advocate for terrible things. It's simply the civil way to behave. And if we just do that, all of the problems just work themselves out somehow. This is why Ezra Klein will say dumb shit like Kirk practiced politics the right way. The contents of his opinions, the actual things he advocated for, are irrelevant to the way that he practiced politics. All that matters is that in advocating for those things, he gave the appearance of politely discussing abstractions, talking about, but never acting on, his bigoted and demented worldview. To the lib, politics is not about the expression of power. It's about the expression of self. It's an in-group to belong to. It's a fandom, a way to validate your feelings and beliefs, to signal to others that you have the good ideas, the ideas that people like. Whether those ideas actually amount to change is decided by how far from the eternal, natural status quo a lib believes them to be. The march of progress inevitably brings us closer and closer to the perfect world that we're all working together to build. And so bad ideas simply require gentle correction, not direct confrontation. Think of the term marketplace of ideas, right? Like they present this as a market stall where people can pick good or bad ideas.
Sounds tasty.
And of course, people are rational actors according to market logic who would naturally gravitate to the good ideas. The good ideas just outcompete the bad ideas. You don't really need to do anything other than present a better idea to defeat a bad idea because it's just going to be innately more popular. But if you're not terminally capitalism-brained, there's a problem that is going to leap out at you in this analogy. Good ideas can't always afford think tanks and public relations people. They're not always funded by petrochemical billionaires. Good ideas might win in a fair fight, but why the fuck would people fight fair when their money is on the line? It also presents ideas, politics, ideology as simply a product to consume, a marker of identity and vehicle for self-expression, rather than the means by which change is made. It's all just a great big exercise in open-mindedness with no tangible effect whatsoever. And this is why they fixate so much on crassness, on the coarsening of the discourse, because it's really the only thing they can criticize. That erodes trust in the discussion that they think will inevitably and always prove them correct. There's a set of rules that if were obeyed, they would always win, and the problem is that people simply aren't obeying the rules. We must force them to obey the rules by being nicer and more polite. If you can say horrible things politely, that's
I think this also plays into what happened yesterday. I know that there's a lot of people upset that there was a call out of Keira Knightley, including for myself, by the way, for what really appears to be just a flippant middle finger to people who are kind of asking, don't you care about human rights? She was asked in a TV interview because she was recently appearing in the new J.K. Rowling adaptation audiobook of the Harry Potter series, because apparently it just needs to be re-released again in every form. Like, it's not enough that it's being re-released in totality as a TV show on HBO. The audiobooks need to be re-released again because there's already audiobooks, you know. I think, you know, what's his face? Pete Fry is the reader of them. But either way, she was asked about it, and so she had this terrible answer. Rowling, whose best-selling young adult series and accompanying movie franchise sparked a pop culture phenomenon in the 2000s, has drawn backlash in recent years for her outspoken views against the trans community. When asked by Decider if she knew about a fan boycott of Rowling's work, Knightley, who is 40, said that she was, quote, not aware of that. She then responded, I'm very sorry, said Knightley, who was joined by her Woman in the Cabin 10 director, Simon Sohn. You know, I think we're all living in a period of time right now where we're all going to have to figure out how to live together, aren't we? And we've all got very different opinions, and I hope that we can all find respect. And in writing, it doesn't sound as bad as it actually was when you watch her say it out loud, so just so everyone thinks I'm not putting words in her mouth, here's the actual video.
Saw you're voicing Professor Umbridge in the new Harry Potter audiobooks. I was wondering, are you aware that some fans are calling for a boycott, giving J.K. Rowling's ongoing campaign against trans people?
I was not aware of that, no. I'm very sorry. You know, I think we're all living in a period of time right now where we're all going to have to figure out how to live together, aren't we? And we've all got very different opinions. So I hope that we can all find respect.
And it's, you know, 100% just, you know, nuclear grade fodder for people who want to be like, what is the problem with what she said? Is that unreasonable by any measure? She's saying something that I think you would agree with. You don't agree with that? We all have to figure out how to live together, and we should work towards that. Is that a controversial statement? My God, all of you activists have completely lost your minds where you think something like this is in any way, you know, a negative thing to have said. And it's like, first off, we're not just talking about someone who randomly said something mean and then afterwards was like, oh yeah, I'm sorry about that. I shouldn't have said that. That was a bad joke. Either way, we're talking about someone who actively uses her money that she earns from the Harry Potter franchise to legislate and work on, you know, passing laws and things that will take away the rights of trans people, including, you know, I would say pretty aggressively trying to legislate them out of existence. If you want to talk about, you know, J.K. Rowling, she has actively denied aspects of the Holocaust and the persecution of LGBTQ plus people therein. In addition to, she has now gotten to the point where she's actually telling people to post pictures of women who go to women's washrooms who they don't fit the bill of what they consider to be, I guess, cis enough or biologically female enough. And that's a really fucked up thing to just advocate on the behalf of actually inspecting and taking photos of strangers as they try to go to the bathroom. She is an extremist by definition, and it's impossible at this point to continue to say that you had no idea about that. Oh, I was completely unaware. It's the only thing J.K. Rowling talks about every day online, from the moment she wakes up from a weird black mold cocoon and then sits atop her high castle, so the moment she goes to bed, she is tweeting non-stop transphobic bile. She's doing everything in her power to make the lives of trans children more frightening. That's what she does full time. So yeah, it's fucked up to pretend that you have no idea what's going on, but even were that true, it's then really fucked up to put the onus on people who are asking you, who love your work, who might be fans of your work. Is this something that you care about and want to address? And to respond to that with, well, I mean, I think all of us are going to have to learn how to get along. Can we reserve any of that for the bigots? For the J.K. Rowlings of the world, for the people who are actively using their wealth, power, fortune, and platform to try and destroy the lives of trans people? Why don't they get that kind of criticism? Why isn't it? It would be really lovely if J.K. Rowling worked more on trying to be nicer and trying to learn more and trying to actually get along with other people in this world, because a lot of what she does is recycling the same forms of bigotry that ended up doing the persecution of, say, gay people for decades, where they were not allowed to love people that they loved, where they were not allowed to marry people that they loved, where they were not allowed to even have relationships with people that they loved, where they would be arrested, where they would be beaten, where they would be lynched, where they would be chemically castrated by the state simply for how they were born. The same recycled talking points that led to the persecution of homosexuals, which she is completely fine now, you know, adding into her book a little bit later, like, oh, did you know Dumbledore was gay? And it's like, yeah, did you know that gay people experienced a lot of the same kinds of bigotry that you are now doing actively to trans people because you refuse to learn? How many times do people have to point out how batshit and how fucking dog shit your arguments are? J.K. Rowling nonstop, every single time she tries talking about this, has gotten into so many fucking random corners where she's like, a woman is person who has a womb. And then someone's like, what about women who go through menopause? What about women who are intersex? What about people who are born without wombs? What about people whose wombs do not function? What about all of that? Are they not considered women? I see someone has tried to pull a trick question on me. We shall say, a woman is anyone born initially with a womb, functional or not. There, haha. Or when people start telling her, a lot of what you're doing is the same tactics that were done by the Nazis. And then she's like, oh, you must have fucking imagined that in a fever dream. It's like, oh my God, you're doing a form of Holocaust denial. The Nazis absolutely persecuted LGBTQ plus people. What are you doing right now, JK? What the fuck is going on here? Why don't we ever reserve this kind of like, can't we all just get along, to the person or the people who do not get along? This goes back to all the same things that Thoughtsong was talking about here, and the feckless libs, you know, your Ezra Kleins or your fucking Gavin Newsoms, who at one point or another are going to get to this, I guess, inflection point when it comes to civil rights and things that they are not willing to be courageous on, because frankly, they just don't care. And they find it just to be burdensome and tiresome and getting in the way of them winning elections, which is all that really matters. We need to win. We need to win. At the end of the day, just winning. All that matters is winning. Winning for what? That doesn't matter. I don't care for what. For just winning. We need to win. This is a battle. There are two teams. One team wins, one loses. We need to win, and that's all that matters. Okay, well, there's a lot of people who are very frightened right now because they are having their civil rights stripped away by a very far-right fascistic regime that is directly targeting them consistently. That would be the Trump administration. So as an alternative to that, they are looking towards perhaps another political party that will stand up for them and speak on their behalf, or perhaps even celebrities or people who have voices or can be advocates on this to be able to stand up and talk about this kind of stuff instead of being feckless cowards who just suddenly collapse at the first instance of, oh, what? I have to do something that makes me uncomfortable. No. Look, trans rights are human rights. Okay, I said it. I said the thing. There you go. But like, honestly, we need to have a discussion at this point in time about whether or not they might have some points in regards to sports. All right, or maybe some points in regards to children and some of the stuff, puberty blockers. I mean, I'm not personally a scientist. I haven't really looked into it, but I'm starting to feel that people are saying that it's scary and might have some irreversible consequences. So can we just admit that they have some points, and this is a debate, and that it's not an unhealthy thing to have a debate? Because again, in the marketplace, the people who have the better points will be able to rise to the top, not those who have a lot of funding, power, and capital under capitalism, which is how this always seems to go. It seems like historically, when it comes to movements that are bigoted in their origin, they're not really based in any kind of scientific foundation, and so that's why they have to rely upon biases and bigotry, which is why it can be so effective to start spreading rumors about, say, homosexuals in the past, that they are inherently predatory, that many of them are groomers and pedophiles, that they are actually targeting children, that these groomers and pedophiles are trying to steal your kids. These same people are trying to trick people into having sex with them because they can't do it otherwise. Those other same people also are riddled with disease and are trying to spread diseases to everybody. This is the problem and the plight with the homosexual, and why they must be legislated and arrested and removed from society. And when you hear that all out loud, you're like, oh my God, that's grotesque. That's what people actually used to believe. That's, yeah, entirely what they used to believe. And the past laws, draconian laws, would actually affect gay people's lives. Yeah, that's why there was civil rights movements in order to fight back against that oppression that eventually won. And it wasn't over a day. It wasn't over the course of a week. It was years and years of international struggle and protests and people dying en masse. The streets, the rainbow flag is a flag that is coated in blood, and people need to respect and understand that history lest they repeat it. And boom, we're here at a point where it's happening to a different group, and then all of a sudden everything is normalized again. Now it's totally fine to be like, yeah, I mean, I agree, all of that was bigoted what you just said, but like, when it comes to trans people, it does feel like some of them are inherent dangers to children. Some of them are trying to get into the bathrooms that they're not supposed to be assigned to. Some of them are simply men who are predators, who are trying to use it as some kind of cheat code to get into women's spaces, like women's athletic teams. And like, yes, yeah, no, certainly, yeah, when male perverts are going to spend years taking HRT in order to finally find the cheat code of playing on an athletic team that they don't even fucking qualify for and will never be able to get into for their entire lives, because it's actually hard to play a lot of sports, especially playing sports while you are medicating yourself with hormones. But hey, sure, that seems to be a strategy that all of these men have figured out as a cheat code in order to get through all of these processes. But in the meantime, can you actually sit back and reflect and look at how much of this stuff is just being recycled over and over, how the same things are being done to people of color throughout history, where they're supposed to be portrayed as inherently sexual, as sexual deviants, as potential dangers to children, as coming for women, all of that, it's all very weaponizable. It's why it keeps being used by bigots, because the stuff that they are espousing is not based in scientific reality. There is no difference between the races. There isn't actually an inherent difference in the IQ between white people and black people. Black people don't have brains that weigh less. Black people are not more predisposed towards violence. All of that was made up. It was made up to scare and fearmonger, to have the white majority get really, really terrified and be like, oh my God, my word, they're coming for the white women. Oh, we must put a stop to these brutes, certainly. No. They apparently are sexual deviants. Well, gosh, recycle, use it over and over again. And then, if you're just sitting on the fence on the meantime, you are in part complicit, because you normalize their position. If you sit there and say, well, I mean, maybe she says some things that are disagreeable, but at the end of the day, we all have to find a way to get along. We all have to find a way to work together and to love each other, you know, on some level. And so that's what I would say to people who are upset about me starring in yet another J.K. Rowling franchise and rebooting it for another generation.
What you're supposed to do. That's what they want. Because like if you say the bad ideas, they can then outcompete them with their better good ideas. It's brand management. When they're rude, it lets you do negative PR on their ideas. And when you're rude, it grants them the same opportunity. So you're not just someone that believes something. You don't just express your thoughts willy-nilly. You must always carefully consider the optics. Because you're a brand ambassador for whatever thing you believe. You're trying to sell it. You're trying to be appealing. We don't want to lose normal people. We have to consider the demographics. You're not included in the demographics. It would never occur to them that this back and forth could have the effect of making bad ideas more popular. Because in the mind of the lib, bad ideas simply don't get more popular. Anyone who holds a bad idea simply has not been exposed to the good alternative yet. And once they are, they'll always choose it. Someone has failed to explain this sufficiently to the dum-dums. Once the dum-dums hear it laid out for them as simply as possible, then they're all going to jump to our better ideas. And this also means that if an idea does get more popular, it therefore must have some merit. I mean, if you're taking this free market logic for granted, if you assume that it's baked into how people behave, the only reason a bunch of rational actors would choose an idea would be if there's something to it that we're not seeing. We're obligated to hear them out endlessly until we either convince them they're wrong or they convince us we're wrong. All ideas are therefore worth hearing out forever. Because the bad ones just go away naturally once exposed. No matter how many times the strategy backfires, they'll never, ever lose faith in it, because it affirms their innate sense of superiority, that their ideas and their worldview is so self-evidently better than others, nobody could be exposed to it without being converted. Because all libs really want out of all of this is to feel good about having already made the right choices, about believing the right things. Only small changes are possible, and so the stakes are therefore perpetually small, perpetually unworrying. The system will protect them, and the system cannot be broken. In a weird way, I think Charlie Kirk also kind of gives them that sense of superiority because he's their heel. He's the mouthpiece for the bad ideas that they don't like. He's always there to say the wrong thing, to endorse the wrong policies and argue in their defense, but never to actually complicate that simple relationship by doing anything himself. The plausible deniability he maintained also allows a lib to delude themselves into thinking that he could not be dangerous to them because he didn't break their rules, he didn't violate their norms, and so any danger he posed was abstract, imagined, easily countered simply by presenting your superior ideas. How brave of him to be willing to subject himself to that over and over. We should applaud him for having the courage to put himself in this position. Sure did it a lot. And that's great. That's great for us because we want him to do that because it's bad for his side, bad for his project, which, come to think of it, makes it kind of weird that he did it so much. Like, it's weird that he'd be so into it if it's bad for him. It's almost like he got something out of this process. It's almost like it helped him in some way. It's almost like this wasn't an exercise in the free exchange of ideas, but an opportunity for a fringe extremist to make his bigoted positions more mainstream, one which credulous libs happily played along with, one which they're all too ready to continue playing along with in the wake of his murder, because they find the idea of normalizing him and the toxic fascist project he represents more acceptable than having to endure being called an asshole on Twitter. Hey, thank you for watching this video that I thought would just be a quick one I could do on a current event, and then it wasn't a current event anymore, and now it's just a video I made saying stuff that a bunch of people have already said. But again, please like...
Yeah, you should go support Thought Slime. I'm going to share the link to Thought Slime's channel to people who were asking who was the creator. The creator's Thought Slime, and to people also who were using a variety of pronouns. Guess what? Every single one of you was correct in every pronoun you use because Thought Slime is any all. So for those who were using her, you were right. For those who were using them, you were right. For those who were using he, you were right. You get to use any pronouns. Thought Slime's position is what do you got? What do you got? So you were all right. Every one of you was using the correct pronouns. Good job. You all win. You all win the prize of being awesome and friendly.
Thank you so much to our patrons for making this show possible. We could not fund it without you. And if you want to join, please check out patreon.com/theserfs to unlock bonus episodes, uncensored content, and all the good stuff. Thanks to Anna Loves Riley, Addercap, Bobby Lasers, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hegbard Salim, Multimondi, Omni, Political Papi, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demmel, Tigwick, and Words Greenwood.